The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March of 1884, and Victoria Jane Harper read it 3 times before she allowed herself to cry. Her father was dead, trampled by a spooked horse during a cattle drive 2 weeks prior, and the ranch she had grown up on now belonged to her alone. At 23 years old, she had helped run the Harper spread for the last 5 years while her father's health declined. But ownership was something entirely different in the Wyoming territory, especially for a woman. She stood on the porch of the small ranch house outside Opal, Wyoming, watching the morning sun paint the Wind River Mountains gold in the distance. The letter crumpled in her hand as she thought about everything her father had taught her. How to rope a calf, how to read the weather, how to judge good breeding stock from poor. He had raised her like the son he never had after her mother died giving birth to a stillborn boy when Victoria was only 7. Now she was alone with a failing ranch, debts to pay, and a herd so depleted she could barely call it a working operation. The funeral had been small. Her father had been a solitary man, respected but not particularly social. Victoria had worn her only black dress and accepted condolences from neighbors who looked at her with pity. She knew what they were thinking. Poor girl, all alone now, should have married when she had the chance. But Victoria had turned down 2 proposals in the last 3 years, both from men who saw her father's land as more attractive than Victoria herself. Now, standing in the cool spring air, she made a decision. She would rebuild the Harper Ranch. She would buy cattle, hire hands, and prove that a woman could run a spread as well as any man. The determination burned in her chest, hot and fierce, as she walked to the barn to saddle her mare. Opal was a growing town, benefiting from the railroad that had pushed through 5 years earlier. Main Street boasted a general store, a bank, 2 saloons, a hotel, a church, and the office of James Pritchard, the cattle broker who arranged sales between ranchers. Victoria tied her mare outside Pritchard's office and smoothed her riding skirt before entering. Pritchard was a portly man with mutton chops and shrewd eyes. He looked up from his desk when she entered, his expression shifting from professional interest to something like discomfort. "Miss Harper," he said, rising halfway from his chair before settling back down. "My condolences about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you, Mr. Pritchard." Victoria remained standing, her hands folded in front of her. "I am here on business. I need to purchase cattle, at least 50 head to start, good breeding stock. I can offer payment over time with interest." Pritchard's eyebrows rose. "Miss Harper, I am not sure you understand the situation. Your father's debts will be paid," Victoria interrupted. "I have his life insurance policy which will cover the immediate obligations. The ranch itself is profitable if properly stocked." "I know cattle, Mr. Pritchard. My father taught me everything." "I am sure he did." Pritchard leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "But the ranchers I work with, they have certain expectations. They prefer to do business with established operations with men who... with men." Victoria's voice was flat. "You mean they will not sell to a woman?" Pritchard had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It is not personal, Miss Harper. It is simply the way things are done. Perhaps if you were to marry or bring in a male partner—" "I see." Victoria turned toward the door, her back rigid. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Pritchard." She rode directly to the Morrison Ranch, the largest operation within 50 miles. Cyrus Morrison had sold cattle to her father many times. Surely he would be reasonable. But Morrison met her at his gate, hat in hand, apology in his eyes. "I am sorry, Miss Victoria," he said. "I just do not feel right selling livestock to a woman on credit. If you had the cash money, maybe, but extending terms, that is a man's agreement. I need to know the person I am dealing with can handle trouble, can drive cattle, can hold up their end of a bargain. I can do all those things, Victoria said, fighting to keep her voice steady. You have seen me work cattle with my father. Helping is different from running things. Morrison shifted his weight. I just cannot do it. I hope you understand. She did not understand. She rode to 3 more ranches that day and received the same answer at each one, delivered with varying degrees of politeness. By the time the sun began to set, Victoria was exhausted and furious. She stopped at the Rusty Spur Saloon, one of the few establishments in Opal that served food, and took a table in the back corner where respectable women were tolerated as long as they kept to themselves. The stew was watery but hot, and Victoria ate mechanically, her mind racing through her dwindling options. She could sell the ranch, but it would fetch a pittance without adequate stock. She could try to borrow money from the bank, but they would want collateral she did not have. She could, pardon me, miss. Victoria looked up to find a man standing beside her table. He was tall, probably just past 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that assessed her with intelligence. He wore working clothes, dusty from the trail, and a gun belt that had seen considerable use. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with strong features that might have been handsome if he smiled. I do not mean to intrude, he continued, but I overheard you talking to Cyrus Morrison this afternoon. I was delivering horses to his ranch. My name is Isaac Montgomery. Victoria studied him warily. Victoria Harper, I know. He gestured to the empty chair. May I? She nodded, curiosity overriding her caution. Isaac Montgomery sat down, removing his hat and setting it on the table. Up close, she could see the calluses on his hands, the kind that came from years of rope work and hard labor. I heard what Morrison told you, Isaac said quietly. About not selling cattle to a woman. I have been hearing the same story at every ranch I have visited today, asking around about you. Victoria stiffened. Why would you be asking about me? Because I think what they are doing is wrong. Isaac met her eyes directly. And because I might have a solution if you are willing to hear it. I am listening. Isaac leaned forward, his voice low enough that the other patrons could not hear. I have been working cattle drives for 12 years, ever since I was 18. I have saved most of my wages because I have been planning to start my own ranch. I have good credit with the cattlemen around here. They know me, they trust me. If I were to purchase cattle in my name and then transfer ownership to you after the sale was complete, they would never need to know the stock was really yours. Victoria's heart began to beat faster. Why would you do that? What would you want in return? A job, Isaac said simply. And a fair wage. I am tired of driving cattle for other men. I want to help build something. Your father had a good reputation. People say you know livestock as well as he did. I think we could make the Harper Ranch profitable again. You would work for me. Victoria could not quite believe what she was hearing. A woman, I would work with you, Isaac corrected. Partners, in a sense. You would own the ranch and the cattle. I would be your foreman. We would rebuild together. And the ranchers would never know the cattle were really mine. Not unless you told them. As far as they would be concerned, they sold to me. I would handle the transaction, sign the papers, and then immediately transfer title to you. It would all be legal and proper. Victoria sat back, her mind racing. It was deceptive, certainly, but was it wrong? The ranchers were the ones refusing to do business with her based solely on her gender. This would simply circumvent their prejudice without actually lying to them. Isaac Montgomery would own the cattle, briefly, exactly as they wanted. What he did with his property afterward was his business. Why? She asked again. Why would you help me this way? You do not know me. Isaac was quiet for a moment. My mother tried to run a boarding house after my father died, he said finally. She was an excellent cook and a good businesswoman. But she could not get credit to buy supplies, could not get a lease on a proper building, could not get any of the things she needed because she was a woman alone. She ended up working as a laundress for pennies until she died of pneumonia when I was 16. I watched her struggle against a system that would not give her a chance, no matter how capable she was. I cannot help my mother anymore, but maybe I can help you. The raw honesty in his voice told Victoria he was telling the truth. She looked at his weathered face, his steady gray eyes, and made a decision that would change her life. "All right," she said. "Let us rebuild the Harper Ranch together." They shook hands across the table, and Victoria felt calluses that matched her own. Whatever else Isaac Montgomery might be, he was a working cowboy who understood the life she was trying to preserve. They spent the next 2 hours at that table, planning. Isaac would approach Cyrus Morrison first, as he had the best quality breeding stock. Isaac had enough saved to make a down payment, and Morrison would extend credit to him based on his reputation. They would purchase 50 head of young cows and 2 bulls, enough to start rebuilding the herd. Isaac would sign the purchase agreement, take possession of the cattle, and drive them to the Harper Ranch. Once there, in front of a witness, he would sign a transfer of title giving Victoria full ownership. "We will need the witness to be someone trustworthy," Victoria said. "Someone who will not talk." "What about Reverend Matthews?" Isaac suggested. "He seems like a fair man." Victoria nodded slowly. She had known the Reverend all her life. He had buried both her mother and father. If anyone would understand what they were trying to do and why, it would be him. "There is one more thing," Isaac said as they prepared to leave. "I will need a place to stay. Just until we get the ranch running properly, I can sleep in the bunkhouse." Victoria hesitated. It would be just the 2 of them on the ranch, at least initially. The impropriety of a single woman living in close quarters with an unmarried man would cause talk. But what choice did she have? She needed help, and Isaac was offering it. "The bunkhouse needs repairs," she said, "but you are welcome to it." "I can fix it up," Isaac said. "I am handy with carpentry." They parted ways outside the saloon, agreeing to meet the next morning to ride to Morrison's ranch together. Victoria rode home through the gathering darkness, her thoughts swirling. She was taking an enormous risk, trusting a stranger with her entire future. But something about Isaac Montgomery felt solid, reliable. He had the look of a man who kept his word. The ranch house felt emptier than usual that night. Victoria lay in bed, listening to the wind whistle through the eaves, and thought about her father. Would he approve of what she was doing? She thought he might. He had always told her to use her head and trust her instincts. Her instincts told her that Isaac Montgomery was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man offering help. Isaac arrived at dawn the next morning, riding a sturdy bay gelding and leading a pack horse loaded with his belongings. Victoria had coffee ready and bacon frying in the pan. They ate quickly, barely talking, both understanding that this was a business arrangement first and foremost. The ride to the Morrison Ranch took 2 hours. Spring was asserting itself across the high plains, with new grass pushing up through the winter-brown soil and wildflowers beginning to bloom in sheltered valleys. Victoria found herself stealing glances at Isaac as they rode. He sat his horse with the easy grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. When he caught her looking, she quickly turned away, embarrassed. Cyrus Morrison was surprised to see Isaac return so soon, and even more surprised to see Victoria with him. "Mr. Morrison," Isaac said, dismounting and offering his hand, "I am interested in purchasing cattle. I heard you have some of the best breeding stock in Wyoming." Morrison's weathered face brightened. "That I do. You looking to start your own operation?" "Something like that," Isaac said. I need 50 head of young cows, good blood, and 2 bulls. I can offer a third down and the rest in payments over 2 years with standard interest. Morrison stroked his mustache thoughtfully. I can do that. Your reputation is solid, Montgomery. Let me show you what I have. Victoria stayed back as the 2 men walked toward the cattle pens, forcing herself to remain silent even though she wanted to examine every animal herself. This was the hardest part, trusting Isaac to choose well. But as she watched him inspect the cattle, running his hands over their flanks, checking their teeth and hooves, asking Morrison detailed questions about bloodlines and calving history, she realized he knew exactly what he was doing. An hour later, Isaac had selected the 50 cows and 2 bulls. They were good animals, healthy and strong. Victoria could not have chosen better herself. Morrison and Isaac shook hands, and Morrison invited them into his house to draw up the papers. Victoria waited outside, pacing the yard while the 2 men completed the transaction. It felt wrong being excluded from the deal for her own cattle, but she swallowed her frustration. This was necessary. When Isaac emerged, he was carrying a folded paper. He nodded to her slightly. It was done. The cattle were his, at least on paper. I will bring them by your place tomorrow, Miss Harper, Morrison called from the doorway. Isaac tells me he is going to be working as your foreman. That is good news. You will need the help. Victoria managed a smile. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. They rode away from the Morrison ranch, and once they were out of sight, Victoria let out a long breath. You did it. We did it, Isaac corrected. Now we need to get Reverend Matthews out to your ranch to witness the transfer. They stopped in Opal to speak with the Reverend, finding him at the church working on his Sunday sermon. Reverend Matthews was a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He listened carefully as Isaac explained what they wanted to do and why. I see, the Reverend said when Isaac finished. You want me to witness the transfer of property from you to Miss Harper, so there is a legal record that she is the true owner of these cattle. Yes, sir, Isaac said. We know it seems irregular. It seems like justice, Reverend Matthews interrupted. What the ranchers are doing to Miss Harper is wrong, and I have no qualms about helping circumvent such prejudice. I will ride out to the Harper Ranch tomorrow afternoon. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Reverend. Your father was a good man, Victoria, the Reverend said gently. He would be proud of your determination. The next day seemed to crawl by. Victoria and Isaac spent the morning working on the bunkhouse, replacing rotten boards and patching holes in the roof. They worked well together, Isaac anticipating what Victoria needed, Victoria matching his pace without complaint. By noon, the bunkhouse was livable. I will get my gear moved in, Isaac said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Then we should prepare the corral for the new cattle. They were checking the fence posts when Morrison's men arrived with the cattle. The cows were trail-weary but healthy, the bulls magnificent specimens with strong shoulders and thick necks. Victoria's heart swelled as she watched them mill around the corral. This was the beginning. This was hope. Reverend Matthews arrived an hour later. They gathered in the ranch house parlor, and Isaac produced the bill of sale from Morrison showing his ownership of the cattle. Then he took out a blank transfer document he had purchased from the land office and filled it out carefully, assigning full ownership of all 52 head of cattle to Victoria Jane Harper, in exchange for $1. Victoria handed him the silver dollar, a formality that made the transaction legal. Isaac signed the transfer, Victoria signed it, and Reverend Matthews signed as witness. It was done. The cattle were legally, officially hers. Congratulations, Miss Harper, Reverend Matthews said warmly. You are now a cattle rancher. After the Reverend left, Victoria stood on the porch holding the transfer document, looking out at the corral where her cattle grazed. Isaac stood beside her, silent, giving her this moment. "Thank you," she said finally. "I could not have done this without you." "Yes, you could have," Isaac said. "You would have found another way. You are that kind of person." Something in his tone made her look at him. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and admiring that made her heart skip. She looked away quickly, confused by her reaction. Isaac Montgomery was an employee, a business associate, nothing more. But over the following weeks, as they worked together to rebuild the ranch, Victoria found herself thinking about Isaac more than she should. He was up before dawn every morning, already working when she emerged from the house. He was tireless, fixing fences, repairing the barn, working with the cattle. He never complained, never questioned her decisions, but he also was not afraid to offer his own opinions when he disagreed with her plans. They fell into an easy partnership. Victoria handled the books and the planning while Isaac managed the physical labor of running the ranch. But the division was not absolute. Victoria often worked beside him, and he would sit with her in the evenings to discuss finances and strategy. They learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, learning to trust each other's judgment. It was during one of these evening planning sessions, 6 weeks after the cattle arrived, that something shifted between them. They were sitting at the kitchen table, ledgers spread before them, calculating how much hay they would need for winter. "We should have enough pasture through September," Isaac was saying, "but we will need to put up at least Victoria. Are you listening?" She was not listening. She was watching him, the way the lamplight caught in his dark hair, the way his long fingers traced columns of numbers, the strength in his shoulders under his worn shirt. She realized with a start that she found him attractive, more than attractive. She was developing feelings for him, real feelings, and the realization terrified her. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "I was distracted. You were saying about the hay." Isaac studied her for a long moment. "Are you all right? You have seemed distant this week." "I am fine," Victoria lied. "Just tired." But she was not fine. She lay awake that night, her thoughts in turmoil. She could not afford to have feelings for Isaac Montgomery. Their arrangement was professional, and becoming emotionally involved would complicate everything. What if he did not feel the same way? What if he did and things went badly between them? The ranch depended on their working relationship. She could not risk it. The next morning, she resolved to be more distant with Isaac, to re-establish appropriate boundaries. But her resolution lasted exactly until breakfast, when he came in from the barn with a baby rabbit he had found abandoned by its mother. "I know we do not have time for this," he said, holding the tiny creature gently in his large hands, "but I could not just leave it to die." "Do you think we could raise it?" Victoria looked at this tough cowboy cradling a helpless baby animal with such tenderness, and her heart melted completely. She took the rabbit from him, their fingers brushing, and felt electricity at the contact. "We can try," she said softly. "I will make a box for it by the stove." Their eyes met and held. For a moment, Victoria thought she saw her own feelings reflected in Isaac's gray eyes. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should get back to work," he said. "Those fence posts will not set themselves." The rabbit, which Victoria named Clover, became a sort of shared project. They took turns feeding it with a rag soaked in milk, checking on it throughout the day. It was a small thing, but it felt significant, like they were building something together beyond just the ranch. In July, a drought settled over Wyoming. The grass began to brown, and the water in the creek dropped to a trickle. Victoria worried about the cattle, spending long hours calculating their water needs against their dwindling supply. Isaac suggested they dig a deeper well, and they spent a week on the project, taking turns hauling up buckets of dirt and stone. It was brutal, exhausting work. By the end of each day, they were both filthy and sore. On the evening they finally struck water, they celebrated with whiskey from her father's stash, sitting on the porch and watching the sunset paint the mountains purple. "We make a good team," Isaac said, his voice slightly rough from the whiskey. "We do," Victoria agreed. She was acutely aware of how close he was sitting, how his arm almost touched hers on the porch railing. "Victoria," Isaac said, then stopped. "Yes." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I need to tell you something. I have been wanting to say this for weeks, but I did not want to overstep. The thing is, I have come to care for you. More than I should, probably, given our arrangement. I think about you all the time. I catch myself watching you when I should be working. And I just needed you to know, even if you do not feel the same way." Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Isaac, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I will still work here. I will still help you run this ranch, regardless of how you feel. I just could not keep it inside anymore." "Isaac, stop talking," Victoria said firmly. When he fell silent, she continued. "I do feel the same way. I have for weeks. I was just too afraid to say anything because I did not want to risk what we have built here." The smile that broke across Isaac's face was like sunrise. "You do, I do." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "So what do we do now?" "I do not know," Victoria admitted. "This is all very complicated." "It does not have to be," Isaac said. "We care about each other. We work well together. We want the same things. Everything else we can figure out as we go." He was right. Why was she making this so complicated? She had spent months learning to trust Isaac, learning that he was exactly what he appeared to be, honest, hardworking, and good. If she could trust him with her ranch and her future, surely she could trust him with her heart. "All right," she said. "We will figure it out together." Isaac raised their joined hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles. A gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that, as the stars emerged one by one overhead. Their relationship deepened quickly after that night. They still maintained separate living quarters, conscious of propriety, but there was a new intimacy between them. Isaac would touch the small of her back as he passed her in the barn. Victoria would brush his hair back from his forehead when they sat together in the evenings. They shared longer glances, more smiles and stolen moments when they could simply be together without the work of the ranch demanding their attention. In August, they drove a dozen steers to market in Opal, the first real income the ranch had generated since her father's death. The sale went well, and they celebrated with dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was the first time Victoria had seen Isaac in clean clothes and a proper coat, and she could barely take her eyes off him. "You are staring," he said with amusement. "You look handsome," Victoria said honestly. His ears turned red, which she found endearing. "You look beautiful. You always do." After dinner, they walked slowly back to where they had hitched their horses, neither wanting the evening to end. Main Street was quiet, most of the town settling in for the night. Isaac pulled Victoria into the shadows beside the general store and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and tentative at first, a question. Victoria answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back with all the feeling she had been holding inside. Isaac made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for so long," Isaac whispered against her hair. "So have I," Victoria admitted. They rode home in comfortable silence, hands occasionally touching when their horses drew close. Victoria felt like she was floating, giddy with happiness and possibility. She was in love with Isaac Montgomery, deeply and completely, and the realization no longer scared her. It felt right, like coming home. The first snow came in October, early even for Wyoming. They spent a frantic week preparing, moving the cattle to the winter pasture, stocking the barn with hay, reinforcing the bunkhouse against the cold. Isaac had been living in the bunkhouse for 7 months now, and Victoria found herself resenting the separation more and more. She wanted him closer. She wanted to wake up beside him, to share her days and nights fully, not just the working hours. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the ranch house, she broached the subject carefully. "Isaac, have you thought about the future, about what we are building here?" "I think about it all the time," he said, setting down the harness he was mending. "Why?" Victoria took a breath. "People in town are starting to talk about us, about the impropriety of a single woman living alone with an unmarried man. It is only a matter of time before it becomes a real problem." Isaac's expression grew serious. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you," Victoria said, her heart in her throat. "And I think you love me, and maybe we should consider making our arrangement more permanent." "Are you proposing to me?" Isaac asked, a smile tugging at his lips. "I suppose I am," Victoria said, feeling her cheeks heat. "I know this is unconventional, but nothing about our relationship has been conventional. We are partners in every way that matters. Why not make it official?" Isaac crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. "Victoria Jane Harper, I have loved you since about the second week I knew you, when you wrestled a stubborn calf to the ground and then cursed it out in language that would make a sailor blush. I would be honored to marry you, to be your husband and your partner in all things. But I need you to know something first." "What?" "I do not have much to offer you," Isaac said quietly. "I have my savings, my horse, my gear. That is it. You own this ranch, these cattle, everything we have built. I will be marrying into your property, living in your house. Some men would have a problem with that, but I do not. I just need you to know that I am not marrying you for the ranch. I am marrying you because I love you and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. "I know that. I have always known that. Isaac, you gave me everything when you helped me buy those cattle. You gave me my future, my independence, my chance. And then you gave me something even more precious. Yourself. I do not care about the money or the property. I care about you." Isaac kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Victoria poured everything she felt into kissing him back. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking. "So we are really doing this?" Isaac asked. "We are really doing this," Victoria confirmed. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church, with Reverend Matthews officiating. Cyrus Morrison and his wife attended, along with a handful of neighbors. Victoria wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and Isaac wore a new suit purchased for the occasion. When he saw her walking down the aisle, his expression made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony was simple, but meaningful. They exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed her with such tenderness that Victoria heard several women in the congregation sigh. The reception was held at the ranch house. Neighbors brought food and well wishes, and someone produced a fiddle for dancing. Isaac, who claimed he could not dance, proved surprisingly nimble on his feet, guiding Victoria through reel after reel until they were both laughing and breathless. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Victoria and Isaac stood on the porch, waving goodbye. When the last wagon disappeared down the road, Isaac swept his new wife into his arms. "Finally," he murmured, "I have you all to myself." He carried her over the threshold, kicking the door shut behind them. Victoria laughed, feeling giddy and nervous and excited all at once. This man was her husband now. They would share everything, their lives, their dreams, their bed. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Isaac made love to her with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. He was patient and careful, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted each step before progressing. It was beautiful and intimate, and afterward, lying in his arms, Victoria felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you, Mrs. Montgomery," Isaac whispered into her hair. "I love you too," Victoria said. Then she propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "But I am keeping my name, Victoria Harper, for the ranch," Isaac grinned. "I would not have it any other way." They fell asleep tangled together, and Victoria thought that despite all the hardships she had endured, all the obstacles she had overcome, she had never been happier. Winter settled over the ranch with a fierce determination. The snow piled high, and temperatures plummeted. Isaac and Victoria worked together to keep the cattle alive, breaking ice on the water troughs, hauling hay to the winter pasture, checking for sick or injured animals. It was grueling work, but they faced it together. In the evenings, they would retreat to the warmth of the ranch house, stoking the fire high and cooking simple meals. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their pasts, making plans for the spring. Isaac told her about his childhood in Missouri, about learning to ride almost before he could walk, about the harsh lessons of the trail. Victoria told him about her mother, the few memories she had, and about growing up as her father's shadow, learning the ranch work because there was no one else to help. "Do you ever wish you had been born a boy?" Isaac asked one night. "It would have made all of this so much easier." Victoria considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but mostly I am angry that being born a woman made it harder. I should not have to pretend to be something I am not to be taken seriously." "You are right," Isaac said. "For what it is worth, I think you are more capable than most men I have known, certainly braver." "I am not brave," Victoria protested. "I am just stubborn," Isaac laughed. That too, Christmas was simple but joyful. They had little money for gifts, but Victoria gave Isaac a new pair of gloves she had sewn herself, and Isaac surprised her with a carved wooden box for her jewelry, intricate and beautiful, that he had made in secret in the barn. "When did you have time for this?" Victoria asked, running her fingers over the delicate patterns. "Late at night when you thought I was checking on the cattle," Isaac admitted. "I wanted to make you something special." Victoria kissed him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "I am far from perfect," Isaac said, "but I am yours." As winter gradually loosened its grip and spring approached, they began planning for the year ahead. The cattle had survived the winter well, and several of the cows were pregnant, promising new calves in the spring. They had paid down some of the debt to Morrison, and had enough saved to hire on a ranch hand or two for the busy season. "We need to start thinking about expansion," Victoria said one evening in March, exactly a year after the letter had arrived announcing her father's death. "If we can increase the herd to 100 head by next year, we will be in a solid position." "Agreed," Isaac said. "And I have been thinking about horses. We could breed and train working horses, sell them to other ranches. There is good money in that." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "We have the pasture for it, and you have a gift with horses." They were building something real and lasting, a legacy that would endure. Victoria thought about her father and hoped he was proud of what she had accomplished. She had not only saved his ranch but was making it thrive. In April, the first calves arrived. Victoria and Isaac took turns checking on the herd, sometimes staying up all night to help with difficult births. It was exhausting but exhilarating, watching new life enter the world, knowing that each calf represented the future of their ranch. One morning, after a particularly long night helping a heifer deliver twins, Victoria and Isaac stood leaning against the corral fence, watching the sun rise. The new mother was tending to her babies, licking them clean, and Victoria felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost overwhelmed her. "We did it," she said softly. "We really did it. The ranch is going to make it." Isaac put his arm around her shoulders. "We did it together. I could not have asked for a better partner." Victoria turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "I never thanked you properly for everything. You gave me my life back, Isaac. You gave me hope when I thought I had none. You gave me purpose," Isaac said. "A place to belong, a home. I was drifting before I met you, just moving from job to job without any real direction. You gave me something to work towards, something that matters." They kissed in the golden light of dawn, the new calves bawling in the background, and Victoria felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The summer was busy but productive. They hired 2 ranch hands, young men eager to learn, and Isaac trained them with patience and skill. The cattle grew fat on summer grass, and the horses Isaac was training showed real promise. Money was still tight, but they were making progress. In August, Victoria realized her monthly courses were late. At first, she attributed it to stress and hard work, but when another week passed, she allowed herself to hope. Could she be pregnant? She and Isaac had not been preventing it, but she had not expected it to happen so quickly. She rode into town to see Doc Harrison, an older physician who had delivered half the babies in the county. After a brief examination, he confirmed what she had suspected. "You are pregnant, Mrs. Montgomery," he said with a smile. "About 2 months along, I would say. Congratulations." Victoria rode home in a daze, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to have Isaac's baby. The thought filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. How would they manage a ranch and a child? What if something went wrong? What if she was not a good mother? But beneath the fear was a deep, primal happiness. She wanted this baby, wanted to create a family with Isaac, wanted to see their love made manifest in a child. She told him that evening, unable to wait any longer. They had just finished dinner and were sitting on the porch enjoying the cool evening air. Victoria took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "There is a baby in there," she said simply. "Our baby." Isaac's eyes went wide. "You are pregnant? I am pregnant." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and joyful that Victoria started laughing. Isaac let out a whoop of excitement and picked her up, spinning her around. "Careful," Victoria protested, but she was laughing too hard to be serious. Isaac set her down gently, his hands on her shoulders. "We are going to have a baby. Victoria, we are going to be parents. I know, are you happy?" "Happy. I am terrified and thrilled and more excited than I have ever been in my life." Isaac kissed her soundly. "When?" "Doc Harrison thinks late February or early March." Isaac's expression turned thoughtful. "That means you will be heavily pregnant during the worst of winter. We need to make sure we have extra supplies laid in, extra help hired, and you cannot work as hard as you have been." The baby will be fine," Victoria interrupted. "Women have been having babies and running ranches for generations. I am not made of glass." "I know that," Isaac said, "but humor me. Let me take care of you, both of you." How could she argue with that? Victoria leaned into him, and they sat together as the stars emerged, planning for the new life they had created. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Victoria had some morning sickness in the early months, but it passed, and by autumn she was feeling strong and healthy. Her belly began to swell, and she had to let out her skirts and wear Isaac's shirts, which made him both proud and amused. "You look beautiful," he told her constantly. "I look like I swallowed a watermelon," Victoria retorted, but she was pleased by his attention. As winter approached, they hired a woman from town, Mrs. Beatrice Walsh, to help with the housework and to be present for the birth. Beatrice was a widow in her 50s with 6 children of her own and a calm, capable demeanor that put Victoria at ease. "I have brought plenty of babies into the world," Beatrice assured her. "You are healthy and strong. You will do fine." The winter was milder than the previous year, for which Victoria was grateful. Moving around was becoming more difficult as her pregnancy advanced, and she spent more time inside, sewing baby clothes and preparing the small room off their bedroom to serve as a nursery. Isaac had carved a beautiful cradle, working on it for weeks in secret again. When he presented it to Victoria in January, she cried at the beauty and craftsmanship of it. "For our son or daughter," Isaac said, rocking it gently. "I cannot wait to meet them." "Neither can I," Victoria said, her hand on her active belly. The baby kicked constantly now, especially at night, and she loved feeling those movements, proof of the life growing inside her. On a cold night in late February, Victoria's labor began. Isaac immediately sent one of the ranch hands for Beatrice while he stayed with Victoria, holding her hand and trying not to panic. Beatrice arrived within the hour, and Doc Harrison followed shortly after. The labor was long and difficult. Victoria had always been strong, but nothing had prepared her for the intensity of bringing a child into the world. She labored through the night and into the next day, with Isaac never leaving her side. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, encouraged her when she was certain she could not continue. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, with one final push, their baby entered the world. The cry was strong and healthy, and Doc Harrison held up the infant with a smile. "It is a boy," he announced. "A fine, healthy son." Victoria collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. Isaac was crying openly as Doc Harrison placed the baby in Victoria's arms. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and his father's gray eyes. "Hello, little one," Victoria whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Victoria, one finger held in their son's tiny fist. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." They named him Thomas Harper Montgomery after Victoria's father. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he transformed their lives completely. The ranch work continued, but it was punctuated now by feedings and diaper changes, and the pure joy of watching their son grow and change. Isaac was a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, singing off key lullabies that made Victoria laugh. Seeing this strong cowboy so gentle with their tiny son made Victoria fall in love with him all over again. As spring arrived and Thomas grew, Victoria began to emerge from the fog of new motherhood. She started working with the ranch again, taking Thomas with her in a sling Isaac had fashioned, conducting business with their son against her chest. It was unconventional, but everything about their life was unconventional. Word had spread by now about Victoria's arrangement with Isaac, about how she had circumvented the rancher's prejudice by having him buy cattle in his name. Some people were scandalized, but others, particularly the women of Opal, thought it was clever. Victoria had become something of a folk hero to the women struggling against similar limitations. In May, a young woman named Sarah Collins appeared at the ranch, riding alone and looking determined. She was about 20, thin and worn with desperate eyes. "Mrs. Montgomery," she said when Victoria answered the door. "I heard what you did, how you got your start when no one would sell to you. I am in a similar situation." My husband died last month and I am trying to keep our small farm going, but I need a plow horse and no one will sell to a woman. I have money, but they will not take it. I was hoping you might help me." Victoria looked at this young widow, seeing herself 2 years ago, and made a decision. "Come inside. Let me get my husband. I think we can find a solution." They helped Sarah Collins purchase her horse, using the same method Isaac had used for Victoria. And when word got out, more women came seeking help. Victoria and Isaac found themselves becoming a sort of underground network, helping women acquire the tools and livestock they needed to survive when the system was stacked against them. It was deeply satisfying work, and Victoria felt like she was making a real difference. The ranch continued to grow and thrive, but this felt like something more important, something that transcended profit and property. They were helping change the way things worked, one transaction at a time. By the time Thomas was a year old, the Harper Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. They had nearly 100 head of cattle, a growing horse breeding program, and a reputation for fairness and quality. Victoria had earned the respect of the ranching community, not because she had proved herself as good as a man, but because she had proved herself excellent at what she did. Cyrus Morrison, who had once refused to sell to her, now sought her advice on breeding programs. Other ranchers tipped their hats to her in town. The bank extended them credit without hesitation. Victoria had achieved what she set out to do. She had saved her father's ranch and proved that a woman could succeed in a man's world, but more importantly, she had found love. As she watched Isaac teaching Thomas to pet a gentle mare, both of them laughing in the spring sunshine, she felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. This was what mattered. Not the cattle or the land or the money, but this: family, love, partnership. Isaac caught her watching and smiled, that special smile he reserved just for her. He said something to Thomas, who toddled toward her on chubby legs, arms outstretched. Victoria scooped him up, covering his face with kisses, and Isaac wrapped his arms around them both. "I have everything I need right here," Isaac said softly. "So do I," Victoria agreed. That evening, after Thomas was asleep in his cradle, Victoria and Isaac sat on the porch as they had so many times before. The ranch was quiet, the cattle settled for the night, the horses drowsing in the pasture. The mountains glowed purple in the fading light, and the first stars were appearing overhead. "You remember the night we met?" Victoria asked. "In the saloon, when you overheard Morrison turning me down." "I remember thinking you were the most determined person I had ever seen," Isaac said. "You had this fire in your eyes, this refusal to accept defeat. I knew right then that you were someone special." "I thought you were crazy," Victoria admitted. "Offering to help a stranger with such a risky plan, I almost said no." "I am glad you did not." Isaac pulled her closer. "These past 2 years have been the best of my life. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Victoria corrected. "That is what partnership means." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen. Victoria thought about how far they had come, how much they had built together. The scared, desperate woman who had received that letter about her father's death seemed like someone from another lifetime. She had been forged in fire, tested and tempered, and had emerged stronger. But she had not done it alone. Isaac had been there every step of the way, not taking over, not solving her problems for her, but standing beside her as an equal. He had given her the opportunity to succeed by circumventing unjust barriers, but the success itself had been hers to achieve. It was the perfect partnership, built on respect and trust and love. In the years that followed, the ranch continued to prosper. They had 2 more children. a daughter they named Margaret after Victoria's mother, born in 1887, and another son, James, born in 1889. The house that had once seemed so empty was now filled with noise and laughter and life. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the cattle as much as his mother did. Margaret was wild and fearless, always climbing things she should not climb and riding horses too fast. James was still a baby, but he had his father's gray eyes and easy smile. Victoria and Isaac raised their children to believe they could do anything, regardless of what society said. They taught their daughter to rope and ride alongside their sons. They taught all three children to read and write and think for themselves. They built a legacy not just of land and livestock, but of equality and determination. The network they had started, helping women circumvent discriminatory business practices, grew into something larger. Other men, inspired by Isaac's example, began helping women in their communities. Slowly, grudgingly, attitudes began to shift. It was not a revolution, but it was progress, and Victoria took pride in knowing she had been part of it. In 1895, when Thomas was 8, Margaret was 7, and James was 6. The family traveled to Cheyenne to attend the wedding of Sarah Collins, the first woman they had helped. Sarah had not only kept her farm but had expanded it, and she was marrying a man who respected her capabilities and treated her as an equal. At the reception, she sought out Victoria and Isaac. "I owe you both everything," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that there were good people in the world willing to fight against injustice." "You did the hard work yourself," Victoria said. "We just helped you get started." "That is what I needed," Sarah said. "Just a chance. That is all any of us need." On the train ride home, the children asleep against them, Victoria and Isaac talked about the future. They had achieved so much, but there was still work to be done. Laws needed to be changed, attitudes needed to shift, opportunities needed to expand. But for the first time, it felt possible. Change was coming, slowly but surely, and they had been part of making it happen. "You ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "Tying yourself to a stubborn woman and her failing ranch instead of starting your own operation?" Isaac looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret? Victoria, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built, our children, our home, everything we have accomplished together, I would not trade it for anything. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. I have never regretted a single moment." Victoria kissed him, not caring that they were in a public train car with their children sleeping beside them. After all these years, he could still make her heart race with a few simple words. They returned to the ranch to find that one of their best cows had delivered triplets, a rare and auspicious event. The ranch hands had stayed up all night making sure all 3 calves survived, and they were thriving. 3 healthy calves, Isaac said, shaking his head in wonder. "That is good luck." "We make our own luck," Victoria said, but she was smiling. As the years passed, the ranch became even more successful. Thomas, as he grew older, showed a real aptitude for the business side of ranching, poring over the ledgers and making suggestions that often proved prescient. Margaret developed her father's gift with horses and began training them for sale. James was still young, but he loved the cattle and spent hours watching them, learning their behaviors and needs. Victoria and Isaac grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had faced drought and harsh winters, sick cattle and financial pressures, the everyday challenges of raising children and running a business. But they had faced it all together, and they had prevailed. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac gave Victoria a leather-bound journal. Inside, on the first page, he had written, "The story of us, for our children and grandchildren, so they know what real partnership looks like." Victoria cried when she read it, and she spent the next months filling the journal with their story. She wrote about the letter that had changed her life, about Isaac's unexpected offer, about rebuilding the ranch and falling in love. She wrote about their children, about the network they had created to help other women, about the life they had built together. She wrote, "I thought I needed to succeed alone to prove I was strong enough. But Isaac taught me that accepting help is not weakness, and that true strength lies in partnership. He gave me opportunity without taking away my agency. He stood beside me without standing in front of me. He loved me as an equal, and together we built something greater than either of us could have achieved alone." When she showed the finished journal to Isaac, he read it with tears streaming down his face. "You made me sound much nobler than I was. I just saw a capable woman being denied her rightful chance and wanted to help." "You saw me," Victoria said simply. "You saw who I really was and what I could become. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." As the 19th century drew to a close and a new century dawned, the Harper Ranch stood as a testament to determination, love, and partnership. The cattle bore the Harper brand, but everyone knew the ranch belonged to Victoria and Isaac equally. They had built it together, nurtured it together, and would pass it on to their children together. Thomas, at 18, was ready to take on more responsibility. Margaret, at 17, had become one of the most sought-after horse trainers in Wyoming. James, at 16, was proving to have his mother's head for business and his father's way with animals. The ranch's future was secure. But beyond the ranch, beyond the cattle and the land and the success, was something even more precious. A family built on love and respect, children raised to believe in equality and justice, a partnership that had weathered every storm. On a warm evening in June of 1900, Victoria and Isaac sat on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Thomas had married the previous year, and his wife had just given birth to twin girls. Margaret was courting a young veterinarian who treated her opinions with respect. James was still young, focused on his studies and the ranch. "We have done well," Isaac said, taking Victoria's hand. His hair was gray now and lines creased his face, but his gray eyes were as clear and kind as they had been the day she met him. "We have," Victoria agreed. Her own dark hair was streaked with silver, and her hands were weathered by years of work, but she had never felt more content. "I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You would have succeeded without me," Isaac said. "You would have found another way." "Maybe," Victoria said. "But it would not have been as good. You did not just help me save the ranch, Isaac. You gave me a partner, a love, a family. You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted." Isaac raised their joined hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles, just as he had that first night on the porch 16 years ago. "And you gave me a home, a place to belong, a purpose. I was lost before I met you, Victoria. You gave me direction." They sat together as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, watching their grandchildren play and their children move through the evening chores with practiced efficiency. The ranch hummed with life and activity, everything they had worked for made manifest. Victoria thought about that desperate young woman reading a letter about her father's death, about the fear and determination that had driven her to take such risks. She thought about Isaac's unexpected offer, about learning to trust him, about falling in love despite her fears. She thought about every obstacle they had overcome, every challenge they had faced together. The ranchers had not wanted to sell cattle to a woman, so a cowboy had bought them in his name and gave her title. It was a simple act that had changed everything, that had given her not just cattle but hope, Not just opportunity but partnership, not just a business arrangement but love. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the ranch, though it thrived. Not the cattle, though they numbered in the hundreds now. Not the money or the land or the success, though they had achieved all of that and more. What mattered was the love they had built, the family they had created, the partnership that had sustained them through everything. As the stars emerged one by one overhead and the children called them in for dinner, Victoria squeezed Isaac's hand. "Ready to go in?" he asked. "In a moment," Victoria said. "I just want to savor this for a bit longer." Isaac understood. He always understood. So they sat together in the gathering darkness. Two people who had taken a chance on each other and built something beautiful. Watching the stars emerge over the ranch they had saved together, over the life they had created, over the love that would endure long after they were gone. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. A horse nickered in the barn. The ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms, secure and thriving and full of promise. And on the porch, Victoria and Isaac Montgomery sat hand in hand, grateful for the journey that had brought them together, for the love that had sustained them, for the partnership that had made everything possible. They had faced injustice and overcome it. They had built a legacy of equality and determination. They had raised children who believed in fairness and opportunity for all. But most importantly, they had loved each other deeply and completely, had been true partners in every sense of the word, had created a family built on respect and trust and devotion. As they finally rose to go inside to join their children and grandchildren around the dinner table, Victoria looked back at the ranch one more time. It was dark now, just shapes and shadows, but she knew every inch of it, knew every pasture and creek, every building and fence post. This was her legacy, built with her own hands and Isaac's beside hers. They walked inside together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, moving as one as they had learned to do over 16 years of partnership. The house was bright and warm, filled with voices and laughter and love. This was what they had built, not just a ranch but a home, not just a business but a family, not just a partnership but a love story for the ages. And as they sat down to dinner, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and their love, Victoria caught Isaac's eye across the table. He smiled at her, that special smile that was hers alone, and she smiled back. No words were needed. Everything they needed to say was written in that glance, in the life they had built, in the love that would endure forever. The story that had begun with injustice and determination had become a story of love and partnership. The woman who had been denied her chance had not only seized it, but had helped create opportunities for countless others. The cowboy who had offered help had found a home and a family and a purpose greater than anything he could have imagined. Together, they had proven that love and partnership could overcome any obstacle, that determination and justice could change the world, and that two people working together could achieve miracles. And they lived happily, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built, for many long years to come, their love story becoming legend in the small town of Opal, Wyoming, inspiring generations of women to fight for their rights and men to stand beside them as equals, partners in building a better world.